and welcome to the IAB Brand Academy webinar. The topic of today's session is Growth Strategies through Consumer Journey Marketing. We will have a few minutes towards the end of the panel discussion to address your questions. Please make sure you submit the questions through the Q&A box button on the Zoom screen. Allow me to introduce Seraj Bharwani, Chief Strategy Officer at AcuityAds, who will be moderating today's session. For those who are not familiar with the company, AcuityAds is a Canadian publicly owned company that invented Illumin, the first omnichannel journey automation platform in the ad tech industry. And now, without further ado, here is Seraj.
Thank you, Mona. Good morning. How is everybody? Barbara and Gil, welcome. I'm so delighted to have you here today in this forum. We've known each other for so long. Frankly, this was just a great excuse to get together and talk about all the great things that you guys have been doing. So why don't we start with you introducing yourself? Barb, you want to start?
Sure. Thank you so much, Seraj and Aluminum, for the opportunity to join. It is a bit of a reunion, which makes it fun. I'm thrilled to be here today as the CMO of Rocket Software. I have joined recently, and I've spent time on the client side as well as a long stretch at Digitas, and always thought about the customer journey. So today's conversation is certainly relevant. Thanks.
Fantastic. Gil.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for having me. I'm Gil, based out of Israel. And I'm the CMO of a company called Resident, which some of you might know and some of you might not know. At Resident, I lead marketing and data science across the organization. And I've been at Resident for about 3 years. Prior to that, I've worked at Google for 7 years, leading a variety of sales teams on multiple industries, including e-commerce, B2B, and others. And happy to be here.
Yeah, excellent. So Gil and Barb, let me give a little bit of a context to our audience and in terms of why we are talking about this, right? I mean, both of you come with substantial experience in the marketing arena and the things that you guys have done. There are so many things we could be talking about today, frankly, but we only have like barely 40 minutes. And so within that, we need to focus. And the focus here is going to be all about growth. As you know, sales and market share growth is top of mind for most marketers these days. So much so that companies are now recruiting for the chief growth officer to make sure that there is enough of an emphasis there. Investors love it, obviously. There is a growth premium on valuation and so forth. The growth script over the past decade has been go downstream at the low end of the funnel. Reach those who are in market to buy using search, social media, deliver growth with a measurable ROI. This whole pattern and the formula is also frequently referred to as performance marketing, right? You're quite familiar with this thing. But this strategy has apparently run its course based on what I'm learning from the CMOs in my network. As more players in the category move budgets and crowd it out at the lower funnel channels, essentially the bid prices go up, ROIs begin to go down, and all of a sudden now we are on the hunt for something different. And of course, there is only so much growth to be had with those who are in market, which is a small fraction of your total prospect universe, right? And so the question then is where to go next? And that's literally it. That is the conversation for today. So why don't I start with Gil? Barb, jump in wherever you feel appropriate. Gil, what is Resident?
So like I said, I don't know how many of you know who or what Resident is, so I'll give a brief overview. So Resident is basically a house of digitally native brands in the home goods space. Our hero products or brands are around mattresses specifically, where we have a couple of market leading brands like Nectar and DreamCloud, which might be more familiar to the end consumer. Company was founded in late 2016. We were, exactly what Seraj just talked about, which is like the growth story, right? 2 years into inception, we did over $1 million in revenue, named company in North America. And last year, when we were, only 4 years old, the company did over about $600 million in revenue and profitably. And we spend hundreds of millions of dollars a year on marketing, which includes both mainly digital, but since we also sell in about 3,000 retail doors across the United States, that includes basically every marketing channel and known to man or woman. So, we focus a lot on everything related to consumer journeys.
So elaborate on that. Obviously, you found the growth formula. You are able to make it happen, make it work, and so forth. What has it been like for you? What's driving growth for you? What's working for you?
Yeah, so I think, if you look at our space, there are, better and worse examples of, growth companies. Some growth companies have kind of brought their growth to a halt in recent years. Some of them were able to get to profitability. Some of them have not. And I think that the story behind what we do is all about a combination of, I would say, talent, technology, and data. So I think, one, we've armed ourselves with the best marketing and data science talent out there. And that's the base of it, right? Because, another company could come in and, put out big dollars and hire, top talent. And it's very hard to find and very hard to hire, but it is out there, right? But we've also built amazing technology around data, which allows us to collect a lot of first-party data, build very advanced models that really help us harness the data that we effectively buy, right, with hundreds of millions of dollars a year in marketing, and use that to build out the models and build that customer journey that helps us understand how users behave out there in the digital space, but not just the digital space. And the way that we run the business is that these data models and everything that we've built around them allow us to basically build this. If you think about it, every channel has its own point of diminishing return, right? You can spend on Facebook up to a point, and then every incremental dollar you spend isn't as effective as potentially taking that next available dollar and spending it on SCM or on affiliate marketing or on TV, right? And what we've built allows us to really build this ladder of channels or this funnel that understands, okay, at this point, Facebook is no longer more efficient than Google. Move the next available dollar to Google. And then over this point, Google has stopped being as efficient as TikTok. Move the next available dollar to TikTok. So that kind of has always been our secret sauce. We have always been known as the performance marketers of our space, which is why we've been able to build a profitable, growing business that touch wood hasn't stopped yet. So
no, that's truly fascinating. I'm sure, Barbara, you relate with that, right? I mean, this idea of channel maturity, channel saturation, and so forth is it's alive and well in just about every marketing that we have done. I mean, why don't you talk about some of your experiences with journey marketing?
So yes, I'd love to do that. And I think we all face so many of the same challenges. Let me just briefly explain what Rocket Software is, because I'm guessing no one's ever heard of it. So Rocket Software is software that actually is an overlay to mainframe systems and helps to ensure that the data is operating correctly. And in fact, we help modernize it, connect it to cloud resources as well. The interesting thing, and I guess the way to bring it to life, is basically our software is critical software that helps like 44 of the top Fortune 500 companies, or top 50, sorry, to ensure their data is going to transact exactly as planned. So all the ATMs, healthcare systems, like literally 100% of the top 10 healthcare companies go through us. 9 of 10 aerospace and defense companies go through us. 100% of the top commercial banks. And so these are systems that can't fail. And so our software plays that really critical role. So it's important, but guess what? No one knows about us. So when I was hired here, they want growth. But the strong hypothesis is that that growth is going to be delivered by getting awareness and using that awareness to power the lower funnel. And so while the lower funnel and those optimization tactics, those performance marketing tactics are hugely important, we believe we have to make sure we get ourselves on the map to our relevant community. And so building that awareness, but also demonstrating that brand ROI, that's going to work, is hugely important, because we did a model when I was at John Hancock recently that showed actually if you spend at that top of the funnel, it has a direct lift of sales. And we were able to show, a very strong ratio, more than 1.5 times profit. So I think as marketers, you need to put the money in the right places to optimize that customer experience, but you have to show that it's working. And so, I think it's important to, not only optimize, but then, to demonstrate through analytics that you can really drive growth with marketing.
I'll come to that in a second, because that's a very important topic, Barb, which is as you go upstream into that, right? So with Rocket, you decided that awareness is the place where you really need to focus your energies, right? Talk about brands where you've actually been. So you talked about John Hancock, and where was your focus in terms of the journey there? Because obviously your problem was different, right?
So yes, at John Hancock, there was a little bit better awareness. That was still a concern, but also at the same time, we were really focused on the mid funnel, because when I got there, several years ago, the average age of the customer was 66, and we were concerned that we needed to be relevant to the next generation. And so we spent a lot of time really understanding the segments that would work with us, that had the potential to, even if they didn't have wealth right away, that could grow into the products that we had. And so it was a lot about consideration and getting in the map and joining the conversations that they were in. So we used a whole range of tactics, some lower funnel, but we partnered with CNN to do just some beautiful work that was all about, what does wealth mean to you? And just kind of invited people into the conversation in different unique ways. We did a great partnership with the Skim. And so really just worked hard to go where our customers were, get into that conversation, and then continue the conversation in time. But that was really a mid-funnel challenge for us.
Yeah. Now, when you have a challenge like that with mid-funnel, right? Were you going after the segment more direct to consumer, or were you going through the agent channel?
So it was both. We had a very early set of direct to consumer plays. And in that case, it was absolutely, looking to get in the conversation, build consideration, and then do that handoff so that people could take that next action. But we were also, creating that halo of, information education for people that, might not come to market to us directly, but in a 401k program, where an agent sells them insurance, that we would be top of mind, that our brand could be filled with new meaning. When I arrived, the brand, was really filled. It was a trusted brand, but felt really old. When we asked people who was John Hancock, at a party, it was the old man standing in the corner. So we had work to do to be a relevant brand for the segments we were talking to.
Got it. Gil, when as Barb was just talking about, right? When you are engaging the consumer at any stage within the journey, right? Having a broader portfolio always helps, right? Because you engage them. We all know the way you talked about it. Channel saturation happens. Costs are going to go up, which means the more you have to offer in the mix, whether it's the SKUs, the choices, and so forth, the easier it is for you to justify the cost of acquisition, right? How have you been able to manage that at Resident?
Yeah, so I think that's part of the, it's a double-edged sword being a house of brands, because one, on the bright side, there are a lot of advantages that you could tailor a specific brand to a specific customer segment. Nectar and Dream Cloud are not just identical mattresses that we just sell under different brands. Each of them has its own design, its own build. One is like a memory foam mattress. The other one is a hybrid mattress. And, you understand that consumers, they don't go to like a mattress firm on a Saturday because they care about the latest innovation in mattresses, right? It's not an interesting topic, and people understand mattresses the way they understand carburetors, right? So they just don't. So what you need to do is, one, you need to have a product or a brand that caters to basically every niche or every category or customer need. I think, and that specialty with a standalone brand really helps, convince the customer that this is what they need and this is the specialized product that they need. On the other end, having multiple brands kind of impacts your brand awareness, right? Because your marketing dollars are now being spent across several different brands, and they're not, spent behind one single hero brand like a Casper. And of course, that means that, every brand needs to be standalone profitable, needs to, find its footing. And me as, not just me as the chief marketing officer, but basically every leader in the organization needs to make sure that the resources are split appropriately between the brands, because otherwise it's very easy to end up with just one brand getting all the attention and all the focus, but you need those other legs of the stool in order for everything to really work.
Yeah, got it. Barbara, coming back to you, you've spent a lot of time in the automotive category, and you know what life is like over there, right? I mean, if there is a vertical category where there is just amazing siloed approach to marketing, the tier ones, the tier twos, the tier threes, but frankly, there's a tier 1.5 as well in there somewhere. Not only that, even the tiers have like specialist agencies many times, or specialist departments actually focus on that aspect of it. How were you able to manage that? Because as a consumer, right, I don't care about any of that. I just feel like, okay, I know a bunch of brands, I've talked to some friends, I've had some experiences and so forth, and I'm going to pursue and follow whatever it is journey that I have to go through. I may not decide next week, next month, maybe in a few months from now or whatever. How were you able to manage that? Give us some examples of how you were able to manage that whole journey approach and think about that.
So yes, I did spend a lot of time in Detroit, and specifically with General Motors, definitely over 10 years. And I had the opportunity to actually work on two parts of the business. One part was at like the enterprise level, and they were trying to build this like huge customer database. And, what they thought was that once they had everyone in one database of all General Motors, then they might be able to move people between the brands. But what they weren't doing, and what their hypothesis, was missing, was that it wasn't consumer led. A consumer didn't automatically plan out their car buying process. So I'm going to start with the Pontiac, and maybe I'll move to a Buick. And I've always wished for a Cadillac. And so, brands, to what Gil's saying, brands mean different things to different people, and you can't force that upsell. And so I think the more meaningful time I had a GM was when I was able to really focus on brands. And so, I worked on brands that aren't around anymore, like Saab and Oldsmobile. But I think the biggest impact we had from a journey perspective was on Buick. People knew of Buick, but again, the impression was old, and, that was the first car I had, way back when. And it was a clunker. And so how do you kind of give people a new impression of that brand? Well, we could do all the awareness we wanted. And we did have many, groups or help brought in. We were on the digital side, someone else was on, the TV side, plus, to your point, all the tiers and dealerships that had a role. But what we really found out is yes, we could, refresh the Buick brand, but people didn't believe us. We really had to get people ultimately in the vehicles. And we had these cars that were beautiful cars, like everything about the product was magic, probably like how Gil feels about his, the mattresses. It's the best mattress, people should care, but people weren't getting into the cars. And so we ran a huge program to drive leads into the dealerships to get people in the cars. And then we had to upgrade the dealerships so the experience felt better. It was a higher price vehicle. We really focused on this car, the Enclave, that I ended up driving for quite some time. But once people got in it, it was a huge win. People loved it. And so for us, it was really about that stage of the journey where you needed an experience. And so you needed to spend to get people educated, to start bring them in, but you needed to drive an action. And then once the consumer was in it, all of a sudden their intent went up tremendously because it was intuitive, it was friendly, it was built really for women. And so few cars have been built for women. You get into some cars and it just doesn't fit. It wasn't the case. And so while, being able to then get people in those vehicles over the next 2 years, the numbers of units that were sold of Buicks doubled. And so, now you actually see Buicks on the road. It's not, maybe Gil doesn't, but they're kind of a welcome sight and often a surprise. And it was a very successful story and very much focused on where in that journey was it broken? So where do we have to address?
That's a very, very good point. Gil, does the experience matter? You talked about, hundreds or thousands of doors through which mattresses are actually sold. Does that experience make a difference within your brand and your portfolio?
Yeah, of course, experience matters. And, both from the branding perspective, right? Every brand has its own price point, has its own, audience, with its own household income, its own demographic attributes. And experience, of course, matters. We don't consider ourselves necessarily like a direct-to-consumer company, but actually like a digital native company. We started off direct-to-consumer, but we're selling in all of the big, bedding retailers right now. And of course, we care about how our brands are, portrayed or presented at the retail store. But we also care about, the digital storefront. What we've learned is that about 90% of the people who end up buying our products at a retail store have visited our website at one point in time, right? So the digital storefront is actually the first interaction that they have with, how our brand is presented.
Got it. No, that makes a huge difference. I want to shift the topic of conversation now to the next point, Barb, where you were taking us earlier. A question that is popping up so often now, because as you go look for growth, whether it is within the midstream, mid-funnel, or upstream, upper funnel, the bigger question that keeps coming up is like, well, how do you establish a clear attribution for the spend there? Because clearly it's easier to establish a clear ROI, okay, fine, we spent on search queries and boom, this many people showed up here and bought. That's an easy argument to make. How do you make the case as you go upstream? What is the right way to think about it? Because clearly marketers want to explore the way both of you guys have talked about, right? You talked about the whole stack of channels, Gil. Barb, you talked about in the way you actually look at very specific ends of the journey where you are. You're exploring channels. You need to test, you need to experiment. But how do you create an attribution model around it? How do you prove that it's the one that makes a difference? Every dollar you spend there makes just as much difference down in the way people convert. So each of you take your chance, whichever ones wants to take the turn to really go there. Barb, since you got us started, talk about it.
I just noticed Gil and I are like, yes, this is the gold. So I definitely think as a marketer, you don't have credibility if you don't have the ability to do that. And even like 5-10 years ago, we would want to do it, but we couldn't. We could start to creep up into consideration, but to measure the impact of awareness, it just wasn't there. And it was always like, oh, 50% is working. I just don't know which 50%. So today I find that that doesn't work anymore. And so you do have to find a way to measure it. I mean, I think there's, baseline survey ways that is a start, but I truly believe you need to use your actual data and be able to demonstrate the coordinated impact all along the funnel. And we got to that place at John Hancock. I was super proud of it. We used our own historical data. We built a model. You had all the spend in there, and you can see the sales. And as you go in and out of market, you can see the difference of the different spend at the different levels. And so we were able to produce that model, and then we were using that model going forward and using it to optimize. That is like nirvana, right? That's where you really want to go. So I feel like now I'm at Rocket Software, and we're working to make sure our definitions are consistent, and and that sales believes our numbers, and that we all get to the right place there. And then the next step is absolutely that brand economics, to connect it all the way through. And so honestly, that couldn't be a higher priority. I think if you raise awareness, and it says in some survey that you did, you do not get credit unless you can show with your own data the impact on growth. And so, I strongly believe that awareness spend does impact growth. We saw that at John Hancock, but you have to be able to measure it. And so I think there are a lot of firms that are working on this. I think some are better than others, but ultimately it has to be something you own. So, if anyone is able to do that, please call me. My number is
does the control market idea work? Like, for example, you sort of control it within certain markets versus others, and be able to see, sometimes you can see before and after,
Yeah, I mean, I think you can do a baseline, you can do surveys, you can do control. And I think all of the marketers on the team will believe that. But you need to convince the CFO, the salespeople, the CEO. So if you really want more spend and you're really going to drive growth, not just like iterative improvements, you have to have a methodology that everyone at the executive level believes in. And so I think it has to be much broader than controls and surveys. While those are a start, we ultimately need the full economics.
Got it. Okay, Gil, what's been your experience there?
First, I have to say I strongly agree with everything that Barb said. I think, at this day and age, especially if you're selling a product that's, more research oriented, and the funnel is a bit more complex, it's not just a click and buy because I'm buying a $20 product. It's something that requires more research from the customer. Then that customer has in their journey, they have, for a fact, they have more than one platform over there. And platforms, they are designed to take full credit for every sale. So you can get to a point where Google says something, Facebook says something, a review site says something, TikTok says something, any other programmatic display says something. And all of these say, I brought the sale, I brought the sale, I brought the sale. Eventually you only have one sale. You don't have four. And then everything around that is very, very complicated. And the best solution that we've found is, like Barb said, is, build it in-house using historical data. There are also pretty good solutions off the shelf for multi-touch attribution or media mix modeling out there that can be used if you're less less sophisticated in-house. I think multi-touch attribution helps if your journeys are mainly click-based. Media mix modeling is usually better if you do a lot of things that are more impression-based and less measurable on the click level. But you have to find a way to compare channels on an apples-to-apples basis, because otherwise you can't build that ladder of, okay, now I need to move $1 from here to here.
Yes.
There's no other way to do it.
Understood. There are quite a few new things that are popping up in the marketplace for sure, in terms of the ability to actually do that. we are also running into obviously some challenges in the marketplace lately, right? In terms of how much tracking is really possible, what's feasible, things like that. In terms of the experimentation that you've actually done, Gil, for some of the upper funnel spending, right? Are there things that you have found that like surprisingly really work, and things that you thought they would work just simply just didn't? Were there any surprises here in the past year or so?
I mean, the landscape keeps changing, right? Facebook less effective. It has practically killed other channels who were even less adept than Facebook. And a lot of brands, you see a lot of brands moving dollars to TV or to, they're saying, okay, I need a discovery channel, right? Not like a more bottom funnel channel like SCM. Where am I going to get that audiences, right? And they, Facebook expensive necessarily have gone, it's less effective. So it becomes more expensive. And so we have also tested a lot of upper funnel channels this year. We've spent a lot of money on TV. Like Barb said, we did geo testing, we did surveys, we did also pulse testing and saturation tests. We are seeing good results in a lot of upper funnel channels, including display programmatic, including TikTok. And so, it's good because it kind of forces you to move out of your comfort zone and find those channels that that it's hard, they are harder to measure, so you keep putting them off, like I'll do it next year, I'll do it, and if test it. And now these shifts actually force you to move budgets to other channels and test.
Excellent, excellent. That's great. Barb, anything to add to that in terms of your experiences? Any surprises?
I think it's always different in the type of company you're with. So if you're in a public company and you're looking for quarterly results, it can be much harder to invest in brand because the whole story that they want to tell is like a quarterly impact. So I think that you have to step back and plan differently. And that's even more important to show the impact of staying in market and investing in the awareness, because the tendency is going to be to pull from that. I think with a private company, or now I'm with a PE backed company, there's much more interest and support for that longer term play and for getting it right. And so I think you have to operate, kind of in what type of company you're in. And either way, though, the financial impact has to be there, but you may have a little bit more runway in a private or PE backed company.
That's a very, very good point, Barbara. I'm so glad you actually brought that up, that if you really, really want to go upstream and try upper funnel channels and so forth, having some degree of patience and latitude is always important, even though you will see the impact. It's just a matter of time, and therefore you need to have that runway, right? Okay, we're getting very close now. We only have 5 more minutes. So what I'm gonna do is, Mona, can you jump in and see if there are any questions that we can get, because I can keep going here for a while. We just want to make sure that the audience has an opportunity to ask a couple questions.
Oh, yes, absolutely. We do have a question here, and it is, how do you connect the journey across closed and open ecosystems?
Well, there you go, Gil. I think you were already talking about that, right? I mean, there are closed platforms and so forth. How have you been able to manage that?
Well, I think the key here is, and this becomes more and more important, especially as, privacy restrictions are, more common with both iOS, but also, cookieless world in a few years. All of that leads to, making first party data the king, right? And I think the most important thing is to make sure that you collect all the data. You try to get as much first party data as possible, maybe even build your own device graph to really help map out customer journeys, because the data that the platforms share with you on like, Facebook advertising UI or stuff like that, they're not as relevant anymore. And you need to find your own platform, whether it's like Google Analytics or something proprietary that you're building or something else off the shelf, to really find that one place where all the dots get connected. It's no external platform is going to do it for you in a way that's objective.
I see. Barb, anything to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree. You're always in a better position if you can build that first party data set. And I do think that that's key. You know, even now as we look, should someone take Rocket and work off of, pull the data from the mainframe, or is someone going to the cloud? You know, if you look at the cloud providers, they're like AWS and, others, Microsoft, they're on a path where they're like, we could be in the pharmacy business, we could be in the retail business. And so, you kind of even see that in the future of cloud providers. I think you want to be in a place where you own your data, it's all about your customers and delivering the best result for your customers. And so, that's the lens that we actually say we're differentiated from cloud solutions. And ultimately, that's why I think first party data, I totally agree with Gil, is where you have to focus and be ready. You have to ultimately know the people that you are going after, and then you can build a conversation.
Yeah, I think the concept of a journey is frankly not as much relevant unless you really control that data and the first party information and so forth. Mona, room for only one more question.
Yes, sure. We have another one here, and it is, would limits on iOS and third-party cookie tracking have implications for your business? Any thoughts on proactive measures?
I think Gil already went there even before the question was asked. I think he already covered that quite well in terms of really the all roads are pointing towards first-party data at this point. I think that's what we see at this point. Any other quick question before I recap here?
Nothing from my side.
Okay, all right, guys. So let me summarize this thing, because many times the audience actually hears a lot of things. There's a lot of discussion going on, but they don't know what are the big takeaways here. So number one, yes, it is true that it's not just a figment of our imagination. The issue is real. You can't completely focus on the lower funnel and expect that you're going to continue to grow the business efficiently, right? Which means you have to try the full stack all the way through upper funnel, mid funnel, what have you, and so forth. Barb, you brought up really pointing to the fact that while the entire journey may be important, you want to understand what's the critical component of that journey where you really want to focus, depending on the brand, the business you're in, the life cycle of the business and where it's at. It matters. Like, where is it you're going to make the most difference and the biggest impact, right? And I think the same thing Gil was talking about is like, if you're going to do the cross comparisons of the channels, as you're going to experiment and so forth, make sure everything is apples to apples, because otherwise you really can't come to any conclusion about moving money from one to the other, right? The other thing we are learning from you is that as you go upstream into mid and upper funnel, spend going away from performance potentially and reallocating dollars, you are going to have to test and have some patience there, because while both of you have proven that upper funnel investment does make a difference in terms of downstream both growth and profitability, it could take time. And taking the time to building your models, whether it is multi-touch or whether it is MMM or whether survey-based or however you do that, taking the time to do that right and proving your point to the C-suite, whether it's the CFO or the CEO, will make life a lot more easier in the way you manage your budgets, in the way you reallocate your budgets and so forth. Having those models in place will actually make life much, much easier for you. Did I catch that right? Did there anything I miss?
I think you got it, Seraj.
All right. Well, I am so happy and delighted that you guys could actually join us today. Frankly, I had not seen you in a while, either one of you, and Gil, I think The last time we met was like a few years ago at the Ad Week. I hope we can do that again. Same thing with you, Barb. I hope we can do that again. Thank you so much for doing that. I'm sure our audience appreciates that. Thank you to the audience for joining us today. I know it's really tight and short. There is not a whole lot of thing you can cover, but what we did cover was quite precious. Thank you to the marketing team. Thank you to IAB. Thanks to Mona, to Yal, to Jordan, to Paul, to Lindsay, and the whole team on our side that actually helped with coordinating the logistics and so forth. Frankly, the same thing on your side, frankly, on Gil and Barb. Your assistants were extremely helpful in coordinating everything. So thank you for doing that. Thanks again, and have a pleasant day.